Welcome to this special edition of the New Stack Makers on the Road. We're here at the Open Source Summit in Austin, Texas. Discussions from the show floor with technologists giving you their expertise and insights to help you with your everyday work.
Hi there, and welcome again to Austin, Texas, where we're here at the Open Source Summit, North America. And my name is Heather Joslyn. I'm features editor at the New Stack, and we're here for an episode of On the Road, the New Stack Makers. And I'm here with Aeva Black, who's presented three speeches or presentations at this event. Aeva, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah, Aeva Black, pronouns are they and them. I work at Microsoft right now. Ethical hacker, open source hacker, been working in open source for about 23 years. I gave the opening keynote on trans rights and codes of conduct and building inclusivity. I've also got a talk on one of the software projects I've started called GitBomb to secure the open source software supply chain.
And you'll be reading more about GitBomb in the New Stack in the coming weeks. Today, though, we wanted to talk about Aeva's keynote, which was really inspiring and really moved a lot of people. You talked about transgender and non-binary and intersex people in society, but also in the open source community and in the tech industry. Do you want to give us a sense of the scope of what we believe to be the scope of the population of those
Sure.
folks?
Yeah, and I'm not an expert on this, so I'm just going to cite other people's research. But research that I've seen says that there's about 2% of the population globally that are intersex. This is about as common as red hair. And intersex means that someone has a genetic condition, may or may not be visible, may or may not affect them. That puts them somewhere outside of either of the normal buckets of like clearly one or the other binary gender. Now, transgender and non-binary are not the same as intersex, but kind of all lumps together in a sense that the person doesn't fit into one of the two normal sort of fixed categories. And a research study published by Pew Research, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, shows that today in the US, about 2% of people identify as transgender and 3% in addition to that as non-binary. That's 5% of the US population.
That's quite a lot of people, 5% of the U.S. population. Also, there's a Stack Overflow developer survey came out today or this month, and it tracked professional developers and people who are learning to code, and people who are learning to code while for professional developers, people identify as trans or non-binary is about 1%, a little over 1%. It's more than 2% for people who are learning to code. So people coming up in the industry.
There's definitely a demographic skew towards the younger age right now. The 18 to 30 group was the largest demographic in that Pew Research study. And so a point I made in the keynote was if you're managing a project and you want to attract younger developers who could then pick it up and carry on the work over time, you need to make sure that you're welcoming of all younger developers.
So when someone says, I don't think I know any transgender or non-binary people, so this doesn't affect me, what is your rebuttal to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's trans and non-binary people are all around us in this country, in the world. The ability or safety of being visible and visibly trans certainly varies by state and by city and by region and by friend group. So just because you don't know someone in your social circle doesn't mean they're not out there. Just because you don't know someone in your contributor community doesn't mean that they're not already there, but just not out about it. Lots of people are trans and non-binary and just don't talk about it. It's just a part of life.
You mentioned during the speech, I feel like all the trans women, a friend of yours said, I feel like all the trans women I know on Twitter are software developers.
Yeah.
But there's a reason they may feel that way, and you talked about survivor bias.
Yeah. So it's a pretty common trope, at least on the internet, that like trans women are all software developers, we all have high-paying jobs, we're all loud on TikTok or on Twitter. And that's really a sampling bias. The transgender people who have the privilege to be loud, it's not a full representation of the entire community of trans people. It's also those who've survived to adulthood. And one of the things I talked about was how several of my friends back in high school who were gender nonconforming, like I was back then before I knew what trans was, when I was 10 years old, I didn't know. A lot of those friends were pushed out of society, and some of them died because society isn't accepting. So that's what I meant by survivorship bias.
Something that people in the tech community are very familiar with is the code of conduct, which is pretty much a must-have for any event, any meetup, any gathering. You mentioned that in your speech. You mentioned that some people see that as a tool for punishing them. What's another way to think about that, and how would you like to see that used more? And I know this is part of one of your presentations at this event on that topic.
I'm giving a longer talk on this tomorrow. I've also given several talks on this over the years. I was part of the Kubernetes Code of Conduct Committee starting in 2019, and I've been working on this topic probably since about 2014, 2015. The idea of codes of conduct in the tech industry goes back to about 2010, 2011, in the O'Reilly's open source conference. And so as it's evolved as a tool for community stewardship, what I'm now very strongly advocating for and what we've been pioneering in Kubernetes is using a code of conduct, not the document itself, but all of the process around it to bring in training, support for the community members who then sit behind the scenes, and you might call it enforcing it, but 80% of what we did in that Kubernetes Code of Conduct Committee while I served wasn't punishing people. It was stepping in when there was conflict, when people stepped on someone else's toe, accidentally offended somebody. We're like, okay, hang on, let's sort this out. So it was much more stewardship, incident response, mediation. And so I want people to think of a code of conduct as a tool for community stewardship, support, growth, and focusing on restorative outcomes, restoring the trust in a community, the safety of the individual members, especially of marginalized members like women and transgender people in our tech communities.
That's a different way to think about it, and certainly more productive than thinking of it as a tool for punishment. What are some things that open source projects and their sponsor organizations can be doing to make it a safer place for all its contributors?
Yeah, there's such a long list of things that open source projects and open source communities can do. I can't possibly list them all, certainly not from memory and not in the time we have. But a couple of the ones that are top of mind for me are value non-code contributions, because they build a community, they build the project, they bring in new contributors, so value, documentation, value artwork that builds a brand, because that's how you advertise the project, value project management, things that are facilitating and supporting, and also value code of conduct work. And this goes not just to the project, but to the managers of those individuals. See and value, assign, OKRs, whatever, to folks who are doing that community stewardship, so their jobs are rewarded for it.
One final question. I mean, this is a tough time for LGBT plus Americans.
Yeah.
In particular, there's all these new laws popping up, new bills popping up in Texas and Idaho and lots of states.
And the new GOP platform here in Texas announced yesterday.
Yeah, a lot of alarming things going on. How would you advise all people in the open source community and their organizations to respond to this movement?
Yeah, as I said in my keynote, the culture of a community is determined by the worst behavior its leaders tolerate. We have to understand, and it's often difficult to do so, how our actions impact those who have less privilege than us, the most marginalized in our community. So, for example, when thinking of where to host a conference, think about the people in one's community, even those who may be new contributors. Will they be safe in that location? Right now, I would say that some women might not feel safe in this state. Trans people might not feel safe in this state. It's not a great location. That's also true for Florida and a bunch of other states. That continues to extrapolate also to other countries. There was an incident recently where a conference was moved from a more open society into a country in the Middle East where a whole lot of people couldn't go and attend it. And so think about that kind of impact. That's a big one we can do. We can also work online using supporting moderation, like I was talking about a minute ago, to make sure that conflict does not drive away minorities or underrepresented groups from our projects. And donate.
Yeah, and donate.
Donate to orgs like Tentier in Texas, and yeah.
Thank you very much, Aeva, for all of that. And I guess that's it for this edition of On the Road, the New Stack Makers, and we'll see you next time.
If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you can always subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're on all the major social media platforms. You can always find us at thenewstack.io. We hope to see you soon.